Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And you'll never miss a story again. It started on a Wednesday. Not that the day of the week mattered, it just stuck with me, like the sound of a slammed door or the silence that followed. She handed me the envelope without a word, her face as calm as stone. I thought maybe it was a bill or some legal document related to her late uncle's estate. I didn't expect it to be divorce papers. I remember blinking a few times, that dull thump in my chest, the one that comes before panic. I looked up at her. Her lips were pressed thin, like she was holding back something she didn't care enough to say aloud. There was no yelling, no tears, not from either of us. She just stood there, arms crossed, her perfume sharp in the air between us. She'd worn that same scent the night we first met. I asked, "Why?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped aside and her two brothers came in through the front door, like they'd been waiting. One grabbed a duffel bag from the hall closet and tossed it at my feet. "You should go," she said. "Now." My voice didn't come. I just nodded. My hands worked on their own, picking up the bag, walking past them like I was a guest leaving a party early. It wasn't until I got to the car that my body remembered how to breathe. I drove aimlessly for hours, the bag beside me full of clothes I barely remembered owning. The city passed by in a blur, traffic lights, pedestrians, storefronts, all of it unimportant. I didn't have anywhere to go. We'd lived in that house for 8 years, painted it together, built a garden in the back, argued over tiles in the kitchen, and laughed when we spilled paint on the floors. That house was the place we were supposed to grow old in, and just like that, it wasn't mine anymore. A cheap motel took me in for the night. Peeling wallpaper. A hum from the vending machine outside. I lay on the stiff bed staring at the ceiling, the echo of her voice stuck in my head. "You should go." I barely slept. My phone buzzed a few times. Well-wishers, I assumed. Maybe people who heard something. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands felt too heavy. Morning crept in through the thin curtains. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my shoes for a long time. I was empty, but also full of confusion, pain, and something harder to name. Not anger, not yet. It was only later, days after, that I found out she had inherited over $6 million from her uncle. A quiet death, a large estate, a woman who suddenly didn't need her husband anymore. I didn't even hear it from her. An old friend from our neighborhood had called, speaking in cautious tones. "You didn't know?" he asked, voice low. "It was all over the family's private feed. She and her brothers already started liquidating his properties. Big money." I think I muttered something like, "Thanks," and hung up. I sat in that motel chair, the sun cutting lines through the blinds, and tried to piece it all together. I thought back on the past few months, the coldness, the excuses, the late nights at work that didn't make sense. She used to smile when she looked at me. That was gone. I should have seen it sooner. The next few weeks passed like fog. I stayed quiet, got a small apartment near the train tracks, found part-time work doing inventory at a warehouse. Not because I needed to, but because I didn't want to be alone in my head for too long. She didn't reach out. Not once. The divorce was pushed through quickly. The paperwork was clean. I wasn't contesting anything. I had no fight left in me. But something didn't sit right. It wasn't just the timing. It was how precise everything was, how neatly orchestrated my removal had been. And then one night I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," the voice said, low and cautious. "I probably shouldn't be calling you, but I thought you deserved to know." It was her former assistant. We'd met once or twice at events. "She's been seeing someone," she said. "Since before the inheritance. He works in private finance. I'm sorry. I just thought you should hear it from someone." I thanked her quietly, hung up, and sat still for a long time. Something changed in me that night. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. I started pulling at the threads, quietly, patiently. I went through old emails, bank statements, shared files, whatever was still accessible. I didn't need access to everything, just enough to see what she'd tried to bury. It was in a shared cloud folder, something she must have forgotten about. Inside a document labeled Legal Notes Third Draft. It was sloppy, unfinished. But there was a paragraph referencing a private transfer she'd made months before the inheritance came through. A joint account transfer to her name alone. And it had my name on it. A transfer that tied a portion of her current assets to marital funds. Before separation, before the estate was finalized. Which, legally, made that slice communal. Property. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, breath steady. She'd overlooked it. Maybe thought I wouldn't notice. Or maybe she thought I'd never dig. But I had time now, and silence, and patience. A week later, I found more. Buried deep in her gallery's private portfolio records, hidden behind financial logs and metadata, were photo backups. Dozens of them. A man in a charcoal suit, her smile too wide, the same restaurant in multiple shots. A beach trip that never happened between us. And then, finally, the sonogram. The date was recent. The signature on the bottom corner wasn't mine. I didn't cry, didn't scream, just stared at it like a painting I didn't understand. I saved everything. Organized, dated, tagged. Quiet digital folders. Then I hired a lawyer. A calm, detail-oriented woman with a sharp memory and no interest in drama. We spoke very little. She didn't ask why I waited, just nodded when I showed her what I had. "It's enough," she said simply. "You'll get what you're owed." It wasn't about the money, not anymore. It was about knowing, about not being erased, about not letting her write the end of the story while I disappeared quietly into the margins. Weeks passed. Papers were filed. Hearings requested. She must have been surprised when her lawyer called. I didn't get a phone call from her. Not a message, not a word. Good. Let her sit with it for once. I returned to my quiet routines. Coffee at the same place every morning. Long walks in the evenings. Books I never had time to read before. Silence no longer felt empty, it was mine now. I had no interest in telling anyone what she did. Let her keep her stories. Let people think what they wanted. But the law would handle the rest. I would get half. Not out of pettiness, out of truth. And she would lose far more than money, not by my hand, just by her own design. And I would finally breathe again. Let me know when you're ready for part 2 and I'll continue the story. You said, continue part 2, don't harm YouTube monetization guidelines. ChatGPT said, here is part 2 of your story. As requested, it remains within YouTube's monetization guidelines. No graphic content, minimal dialogue. A quiet and emotionally resonant continuation, focused on subtle revenge and personal recovery. The papers moved through the system like a quiet current. Steady, invisible unless you knew what to watch for. My lawyer, meticulous as always, filed everything through the proper channels. She didn't waste time. She didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. We didn't even have to prove infidelity. That wasn't the focus. It was the financial tie, the oversight she made when she moved a substantial sum into her own account from our joint fund before she told me she wanted out. That was the key. That one transaction made everything she'd acquired afterward subject to division. In our state, pre-inheritance marital assets mingled with joint funds could be legally interpreted as partially shared, depending on timing and documentation. Her mistake was assuming I'd walk away quietly, without ever looking back. I never wanted her money. I just wanted my part of what was already mine. She didn't take it well. I heard about the first outburst from a mutual acquaintance, someone who worked in the family's business circles. Apparently, she screamed at her attorney loud enough that the office across the hall heard every word. I imagined her standing there, red-faced, clenching a branded coffee mug like it was the cause of her problems. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just closed the blinds in my apartment a little tighter and went back to my tea. Still, I couldn't help thinking of how calm she was the day she pushed me out. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Funny how quickly people forget the quiet things, the shared meals, the nights spent talking half asleep, the birthday letters folded in kitchen drawers. It's the silence afterward that makes the loudest sound. Weeks passed. Legal letters, bank statements, formal requests. She responded, of course, but the tone shifted. Less cold, more anxious. Her lawyer requested a settlement offer. We declined the first one. Too low. We weren't greedy. We were exact. I didn't attend the meetings. My lawyer handled everything. I spent those days at the park with a thermos of coffee, feeding ducks, watching children run in circles, unburdened by anything. There's a peace that comes from being underestimated. When people believe you're broken, they stop watching you. They forget how quiet strength grows, how resolve is forged in stillness. One afternoon, I received a package. No name, no return address. Inside was a single envelope, no letter, just one photo. A shot of her, my ex-wife, with the man from the gallery photos. They were in a hospital waiting room, her hand resting gently on her stomach. The timestamp was recent. She must have been close to her due date. I studied the image for a long while. Not because I cared about the baby, I didn't. Not anymore. But because something in her expression told me she was tired. Not in the way someone feels after a long day, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from knowing the consequences of your choices are no longer just theoretical. She looked afraid. I tucked the photo away in a drawer. Didn't mention it to anyone. We were scheduled for a hearing. Not a dramatic one, just the kind of quiet, final step that confirms financial arrangements and asset division. It would be formal, clinical. My lawyer gave me the option to appear via video call. I declined. I wanted to sit in the room, not to face her, but to bear witness. To be there as my life, and hers, officially diverged. The courtroom was small, fluorescent lighting, pale carpet, the hum of HVAC ducts whispering in the silence. She walked in with her lawyer, her posture stiff, her clothes expensive but ill-fitting, like she dressed for power but wore guilt beneath the fabric. She didn't look at me. That was fine. I sat with my hands folded, no expression, no bitterness, just the knowledge that I was not the one who betrayed. When the judge reviewed the financial summary, there was a pause. A page flipped, then a quiet nod. The transaction she made, the one she forgot to cover, was confirmed to have legally mingled her inheritance with joint marital funds before the dissolution. That made a significant portion of her assets subject to division. The judge declared it fair, half. She turned her head just slightly. Her eyes met mine for the first time in months. There was no fire in them now, no triumph, just silence. The court moved on quickly. No dramatic gavel strike, no gasps, just paperwork. Afterward, I walked out slowly, letting her leave first. I didn't need to speak to her. I had nothing left to say. Outside, the wind was crisp. A few orange leaves danced across the sidewalk. Life, it seemed, had already begun to move on. The money came through a month later. It was more than I expected. Enough to start fresh, truly fresh. I didn't spend it recklessly. I found a quiet house near the lake, modest and sturdy, with a small garden and tall trees that whispered when the wind came through, the kind of place no one could take from me. I bought new furniture, nothing extravagant, just simple pieces that felt like me. For once, I picked every detail myself. No compromises, no silent negotiations over paint colors or curtain rods. I learned how to cook for one. I made peace with the quiet. It no longer haunted me. It healed me. Sometimes I saw her name in business articles. Her reputation had taken a hit. Not because of the affair, no one talked about that, but because the financial blunder, the asset division, spooked investors. Her new partner, the man from the photos, had apparently left. A friend mentioned he'd moved abroad. The gallery she once adored downsized. The board had concerns. She was still standing, but the cracks were visible. Not my doing. Just gravity, finally catching up. As for the baby, I heard it was born healthy. I hoped it had a better chance at life than the one we tried to build. Children deserve innocence, even if their parents do not. I never reached out, never looked back. My world was different now. The lake house became a place of quiet ritual. Mornings with tea and a book, evenings with the sound of crickets and the occasional owl. I started writing again. Nothing serious, just thoughts, memories, small reflections. Some nights, I'd walk down to the edge of the water, where the moon painted silver paths across the ripples. I'd breathe deeply, not searching, just being. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory. Not the money, not the courtroom win, but this peace. Hard-earned, unshaken. Let me know when you're ready for part 3 and I'll complete the story. You said continue. Part 3, don't harm YouTube monetization guidelines. ChatGPT said certainly. Here is part 3, the final part of the story. As with the others, this part complies fully with YouTube's monetization guidelines. There is no graphic content or profanity, and it maintains a calm, reflective tone throughout, emphasizing emotional closure and quiet justice. Spring arrived slowly at the lake house. One day the trees were still and gray. The next, small green buds dotted the branches like shy promises. I watched it all unfold from my porch, a cup of tea in hand, wrapped in a sweater that had once belonged to my father. Everything about my life now felt earned, the silence, the space, even the stillness in my chest, where pain used to live. Some days I hardly thought about her. Other days, she drifted in, just a shadow in a memory, never a ghost. I refused to give her that power. She had vanished from most public circles. After the legal loss, her influence shrank. A few of her allies distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the quiet fallout. I never spoke a word to anyone. Not a friend, not the press, not even my lawyer. I let it all fade naturally. That was the nature of silent revenge. It didn't need to roar. It only needed to wait. One afternoon, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter, in a pale blue envelope with my name written carefully across the front. The handwriting was hers. I hesitated before opening it. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. But curiosity, quiet and careful, convinced me otherwise. Inside, a single page. No greeting, no apology. Just a few lines, written without pretense. I thought I'd feel different when I got everything I wanted. Turns out I didn't know what I wanted at all. I know you'll never forgive me. You shouldn't. But I thought you should know that I understand now. What I lost. What you were. What I became. No signature. I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just set it inside a drawer and returned to the kitchen to stir the soup I had on the stove. That was all I needed. Not vindication, not regret, just acknowledgement. Months passed. I joined a small community group that met once a week at the town library. Just people with stories, reading, talking, sharing memories. Nobody knew about my past. Nobody cared. They knew me only as I was now. And that was enough. I planted tomatoes in the backyard, built a bench by the water, took long walks through the woods that bordered the house, learning the names of birds I'd never noticed before. I even picked up photography again, an old hobby she never cared for. Sometimes the lake would freeze slightly at night, a thin crust of ice catching the moonlight like glass. I'd stand out there with a thermos, watching the light shift across the surface, thinking about nothing in particular. That's when I realized I had rebuilt myself entirely. Not as the man I was before her, but as someone better, not bitter, not hardened, just more whole. One evening, as summer leaned in again, I received a call from the attorney's office. The final funds from the divided estate had cleared. There was nothing left to resolve, no ties, no loose ends. I guess this is the end of the road, the paralegal said cheerfully. I thanked her, hung up. Then I walked outside and stood in the soft twilight, breathing in the scent of earth and grass. The air was warm, the sky a soft purple. I felt no weight on my shoulders, no thoughts pulling me back. It was truly over. But it wasn't just the end of the marriage. It was the end of that chapter of myself. The one that stayed silent when I should have spoken. The one that endured instead of standing up. The one that tried to earn love that should have been given freely. That man was gone. Grateful maybe, but gone. I wrote in my journal that night. Not about her, not about the past. Just a few thoughts. Peace isn't loud, it doesn't knock. It waits. When it finally comes, you almost don't notice it. But you feel it when you breathe, when you wake, when you stop bracing for something to go wrong. That's how you know. You made it. Weeks later, I was walking through the farmer's market when I saw a woman smile at me. Just a small, polite smile, the kind you offer a stranger near the tomatoes. I smiled back. Nothing more. No spark, no weight. But it reminded me that life kept moving, that healing was not only about letting go, but also about being open to whatever comes next. I didn't rush it. I didn't chase it. I didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already here. The house, the quiet, the trees, the sky, my own heart unburdened. As for her, I never heard from her again. And for once, I didn't need the last word, because silence was enough. And I had finally made peace with it.